into it as we are going to be featuring Paul Ruiz from Ecuador versus Eric Rios from Spain.
This is going to be such a fun matchup because, first of all, two of the most legendary players in VGC history. Paul Ruiz, of course, getting top 4 at the World Championships and then winning the World Championships in back-to-back years. Considered to be such a phenomenal player representing Latin America. He has so much pride for his home region, and it's amazing to see him back here on the world stage. And what I think is really cool is he is using a restricted duel that is not exactly the most common. It's going to be the Miraidon and the Calyrex Shadow Rider, of course, both very powerful, fast special attackers.
And I think something that's really going to help amplify that, we talked about this a little bit backstage, not only do you have the Friend Guard from the Clefairy that's going to help make sure that both of these Pokemon are taking a little bit less damage, but you also have Helping Hand from the Clefairy to help boost up that damage, as well as Fake Tears on the Whimsicott. So you're dropping the special defense of an opposing Pokemon that really makes sure that that damage goes through from that Calyrex or Miraidon.
Absolutely. I think coming into Worlds, a lot of people had Clefairy plus Calyrex Shadow Rider pinned as you really have to respect this combination. But what I like about Paul's team is normally with these Clefairy Calyrex teams, it takes a little bit of time to get set up. You do have the Incineroar to help support that with Fake Out as well. But like you said, Rose, there's Fake Tears on Whimsicott, and this actually solves for a lot of problems because it means you can just lead Whimsicott Miraidon, Whimsicott Calyrex Shadow Rider, just go for Fake Tears and immediately threaten a one-hit knockout. This is Choice Scarf Miraidon, so it does not hit as hard as those Choice Specs Miraidons, but once you throw Fake Tears on top, it's like, hey, I outspeed you and I'm gonna KO you. How great is that?
It doesn't get much better, but for Eric, it's going to be something he really has to play around. As you talk about this Miraidon and Shadow Rider Calyrex combination for Paul, something else that's a little bit uncommon for us to see is going to be the Calyrex Ice Rider next to the Koraidon. Talk a little bit about anti-synergy with these two Pokemon. An Ice type in the sun, really gonna boost up those Fire type moves for this thing?
Well, the way to get around that is certainly that Water Terra, as you see. This is also an uncommon restricted duo, so I think it's really cool to see at the World Championships, are players going to rely on what's been successful throughout the season? Are they going to try something new? Koraidon plus Ice Rider was this newer duo that popped up because 2015 World Champion Shoma Honami actually brought it to a big tournament over in Japan where he finished in 2nd place. This team has a lot of unique elements of it as well, whether it be the Imprison on Calyrex instead of Trick Room. You've got Taunt, Normal Terra, Fluttermane. I think this is going to be a key player in this matchup because you're going up against Calyrex Shadow Rider. And of course, you have the Fluttermane Koraidon combination. That's actually the first thing I want to point to here. How does Paul actually respond to this? Because you've got Focus Sash and Normal Terra on Fluttermane, and you've got the Fire Terra Clear Amulet on Koraidon. So these two next to each other, having won the European International Championships on Wolf Glick's team, it's an incredible duo. And I think for Eric, it's a really good starting point for him to consider.
I would have said maybe you bring the Rapid Strike Urshifu if you're Paul. You've got the close combat if there's some way that you can bait out the Terra. But then at the same time, why are you bringing the Rapid Strike if you're going to just have wet noodle Surging Strikes in the sun? I definitely think like it is going to be a tougher call. So I wonder where Eric will decide to kind of bolster maybe the Fluttermane. If you really expect that's going to come, then Paul, do you have to just kind of force the Fluttermane to Terra and then try to take advantage of it that way?
Yeah, I think being able to force a Terra out is going to be really, really crucial in this game. It's like, okay, if you are able to bait a Terra out of the Fluttermane, then it turns normal type. Okay, then obviously it's immune to the Astral Barrage, but then you have a lot of other options available to you. I think the other thing to think about is if Koraidon goes for that Terra, it means Fluttermane can't Terra, right? So if it's Fluttermane Koraidon early and you bait out a Terra from Koraidon, suddenly then Astral Barrage becomes a lot stronger. And so, yeah, I think this is not, in my opinion, the easiest matchup for Paul because the Fluttermane Koraidon duo already exerts a lot of pressure. Eric doesn't necessarily have to lean into that immediately either. And the other question I have is Miraidon even that good in this matchup, right? It does not do the most amount of damage. So there it is, Fluttermane Koraidon. Eric saying, Paul, you need to prove to me that you can actually beat this combination.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough one. You're going to see that Koraidon set the sun not only to be able to give it a boost to its own damage output, but also to set the photosynthesis for this Fluttermane. And we are going to see that it's going to get a speed boost. So this Fluttermane is going to be ultra fast, already going to be able to threaten a Shadow Ball into this Shadow Rider Calyrex. You might feel forced to have to go for a Terra now.
Exactly, yeah. I think this is really interesting. Incineroar always has the free Fake Out into Koraidon, right? And as you see, Calyrex is bulky here, and it's able to go for a Terra to get around that Shadow Ball that you called out. So one of the key things I am curious about here is with Koraidon, do you protect? If you protect, you are vulnerable to Incineroar, switching out into Whimsicott, pressuring with Encore immediately, and oh, look what Paul just locked in. So turn one is already spicy, right? Because if you are Eric, you don't have to protect your Koraidon. You can just go for something like an Icy Wind, Fire Terra, Flare Blitz into Calyrex, and so this game could go crazy so quickly on this turn one. Paul going for this gamble, saying, I think you're going to protect Koraidon. Does Koraidon protect right now?
Incineroar is going to switch out, and we will see this Whimsicott take its place, but is this a play that's going to get punished? As we see the Terra go, what happens after this? Eric is going to be the first to respond with the speed of this Flutter Mane.
This is going to be exhilarating. It's like if Eric decides not to protect Koraidon, just attacks, it could be absolutely huge. And if he protects, it is the protect. So Paul manages to get, he baits out the protect, and now you've got Encore Whimsicott on the field.
And you also didn't actually terrestrialize this Flutter Mane. So this Calyrex, while it is going to be taking Moonblast, it does get that special defense drop, which is a small % chance of happening. You're going to be taking an Astro Barrage, bringing this Flutter Mane down to its focus sash. It's going to be so easy now to clean it up later.
I think this is what makes the matchup so tricky for Paul, because even though he got turn one right, it still looks kind of scary. That special defense drop, by the way, a big deal, because now Calyrex is vulnerable to fainting. Flutter Mane is faster. So if you are the Whimsicott right now, you can go for Tailwind or you can go for Encore, but you can't go for both, right? So Eric knows that, okay, my Koraidon is threatened by Encore. He might switch it out. If he does, then of course, Paul can capitalize by setting up Tailwind, giving Calyrex the speed that it needs to outspeed Flutter Mane. Eric might decide to just actually stay in with both Pokemon here as well. And so, yeah, Paul, as you see here, is going to lock the Encore, make sure that Koraidon can attack, but Flutter Mane actually pivots out, does not even bother attacking.
Maybe just saving the Flutter Mane for a little bit later if you expect something to be in the back, or it's a good sacrificial piece if you think you want to pivot out later. It's the Incineroar now getting revealed as Eric's third Pokemon in this first game, as Paul is also going to follow that up with a switch of his own as Incineroar comes back in. This clear amulet from this Koraidon has already put in double duty here.
Absolutely. One of the other things, by the way, from Paul's end is, first of all, no Terra on, or no switch here on the Koraidon, right? And so Paul is baiting this so well. He gets the Whimsicott in on turn one, and now he's going to Encore into Protect. I think Eric was hoping for the Shadow Rider to target the Flutter Mane slot. Paul does not fall for it, and now you are stuck with this Encore Koraidon on the field that has to either keep going for Protect or pivot out, and the Terra has been committed as well. So Paul has been playing lights out to start this game in what I think is a unfavorable matchup, and the point I wanted to call out is there's no Miraidon in the back for Paul. It's actually that Urshifu.
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess maybe Paul sees something that we clearly don't with this Urshifu coming into the matchup, but that's certainly going to be a nice piece to have at the end of it all. And Eric really in a tough spot. I guess the good thing for him is it's going to be Incineroar and Whimsicott. How much damage can you really expect? Is there anything that Eric has brought that could take it? Either.
Absolutely, and the other thing you have to think about is Eric's Incineroar is actually a pretty huge offensive threat, right? You've got the Sun boosting your Flare Blitz, so you can Flare Blitz the Whimsicott slot and basically do a ton of damage. This is where if you had Miraidon instead, as Calyrex comes in, but if you had Miraidon instead, Whimsicott switching to Miraidon would feel really great, but that's not the case right now, and so Eric can threaten with a knockout immediately this turn, but it's just fake out onto the Incineroar.
Eric has been playing pretty safe, all things considered, for how these first couple of turns have gone, and Whimsicott gets a free Tailwind off. Of course, because it has that Covert Cloak, you're not able to fake it out anyway, so at least you're able to stop the damage from the opposing Incineroar, and your Calyrex comes in for free. But at what cost now that Paul does have this Tailwind set up?
Yeah, I think what Paul has working for him is you do have Flare Blitz into Calyrex. If the Calyrex protects, it's threatened by Encore. Eric's way to get around that then is just going for a Flare Blitz onto Paul's Whimsicott here. This is, of course, the Assault Vest on Eric's Incineroar, so there's no threat to, like, Parting Shot into the Incineroar. You could always U-turn as well and Psycho Intimidate, for example. And so, yeah, I think this is a really interesting decision, obviously, to bring the Urshifu, but Urshifu is a Pokemon that can switch into that Flare Blitz, and so it's going to be the pivot right now. Paul dropping a restricted, immediately start off Worlds, and Calyrex does get baited into that Protect. It is going to try to avoid any Flare Blitz damage here.
I will say, it's also pretty nice to have the Urshifu versus this Calyrex Ice. I think just being able to have that defensive capability versus this Pokemon also makes it a bit easier. You're also going to be taking basically negative damage from this U-turn. But now Eric with this Protect gets to bring something else in that might be able to fare a little bit better. It's going to be the Koraidon now that it's shaken taken off that Encore, it's not going to be locked into the Protect.
Dual restricteds now out on the field against two of the most common non-dual restricteds. Tailwind, of course, is set up, and so Paul has been playing super, super well, but he's still looking for damage, right? And right now, it's probably tempting to double up into the Calyrex. The Calyrex, of course, can pivot back out into the Incineroar. Getting that U-turn off into Urshifu was a really big deal because, of course, it broke the Focus Sash as well, and so this is still quite scary. Tailwind is set up, but this is the problem with Urshifu that we were talking about. You're not going to do a ton of damage given that the sun is up, right? So Paul is like, okay, if I go for a Surging Strikes, maybe I do like 40% to something, but then you just threaten me with a one-hit knockout in return. So let me pivot out my Incineroar, let me stall out the last turn of Sun, and then go from there. But this is a big turn potentially for Eric. He can capitalize off this, and Whimsicott is so vulnerable to the damage from the opposing side that I think it's likely it will just fall here.
Paul goes for the Detect onto the Urshifu, but it's going to be the collision course from this Koraidon into the Whimsicott. There's no downside versus the close combat that's going to drop your stats. You're just doing a ton of damage. But the Calyrex decided to go for a Leech Seed into the Urshifu. Protect, making sure that that doesn't land.
This has been really impressive by Paul, honestly. Like, I think this matchup is so unfavorable, and I feel like he's gotten so many turns right, and so he has positioned this so well. Okay, and now you get the Intimidate off against the opposing Calyrex, and you do pressure with that Surging Strikes. There's no more Sun, and you baited the Terra out of Koraidon. There's nothing that can take the Surging Strikes now, right? So Paul had to play in such a particular way to get to this position, and Whimsicott didn't even feint. So Koraidon's like, okay, I know, you got me. I gotta reset the Suns. He's gonna pivot out, gonna bring out the Flutter Mane, basically sacrifice. I think that's the right play, but taking care of Flutter Mane's also nice, right? Because it does so much damage across the board. And so Paul finally secures the first knockout, but it has been a back and forth battle.
It really has. This Calyrex Ice Rider is still able to move on this turn, so you have to expect that it's going to go for this Glacial Lance, try to get some damage down, and hope that you can trade a bit favorably. But see, look at that. The defensive capabilities of both of these Pokemon are perfect in front of this Pokemon.
Absolutely, and this is how you beat the Leech Seed Calyrex Ice Rider sets. If you don't have high horsepower, it means your only real offense is Glacial Lance. Every single Intimidate adds up so much, and Leech Seed is nice, but doesn't do that much damage, obviously, over the course of time, right? And so now Paul's gotten the Incineroar out on the field. You have the Fake Out available to you if you want to, right? And the Calyrex isn't doing much. You can just double up on the Koraidon, go for a Fake Out and an attack with the Urshifu. It's still going to take a little bit of time to actually knock out the Koraidon, but ooh, okay, we're actually seeing the Fake Out here into the Calyrex slot.
Okay, so just going to stop the Calyrex for now, but that does mean this Koraidon is free and clear to go for another collision course, and into the Incineroar, of course, it's going to be a one-hit knockout. Koraidon takes a little bit of recoil from that Rocky Helmet, and I wonder how much that's going to add up if this Urshifu decides to go for the Surging Strikes. Critical to note that Koraidon can't protect in front of this, so Eric knows you're just going to be taking damage from this Urshifu because of that ability.
I love how this is played out for Paul, because now you just get the free switch into your Calyrex Shadow Rider, and you have Astral Barrage pressure, right? I feel like the way Paul positioned this game was actually a masterclass in VGC, and you would think, oh, Incineroar going down here doesn't feel that great, but you've already gotten the Intimidate onto Calyrex, right? And you could have gone for Fake Out onto Koraidon, but by actually letting the Koraidon get a knockout now, you can switch into that Calyrex. And so, I mean, this has just been a beautiful game by Paul, and Urshifu, not the most intuitive Pokemon to bring into this matchup, but he made it work so well. I cannot express, though, how well Paul has been playing this game from beginning to end. And so, still a couple turns of Sunlight. Of course, one of the things to pay attention to is Calyrex's speed relative to Koraidon as well, because you always have the potential of Calyrex to be a little bit slower, right? But either way, oh my goodness. Like, I cannot express how beautiful of a game this has been for Paul Ruiz.
All we need to know is that this is the true skill expression of a previous world champion, and we're seeing it play out before our eyes. Eric has no choice if he wants to preserve this Koraidon for later to bring in this Incineroar, and at least hope that this Incineroar will be able to pressure something out a little bit later. Because his Shadow Rider Calyrex already terrestrialized, if it survives his attack thanks to its typing, then you will be able to go for a Fake Out a little bit later. Calyrex holds on. It is a bit more bulky, but can the Urshifu finish it off with the close combat and the Incineroar? The Intimidate is just not enough to save it with that critical hit, of course. And so Incineroar goes down. Eric Rios in this first game down to his final two Pokemon.
Yeah, my main question there is whether or not the critical hit saved the Incineroar. Even if it doesn't get the KO, you're still pressured by the Astral Barrage. But let's see, does Glacial Lance get the knockout? It does not. And look how key those Intimidates are. Normally with these Leech Seed leftover Calyrexes, you love to run a lot of bulk, and so you have less attack investment, and you're up against a Calyrex with bulky investment, right? So Paul Ruiz, take a bow. This has just been absolutely beautiful. Turn after turn after turn. He knows this is not an easy matchup. And this is what I love about the World Championships. The players have spent so much time thinking about their game plans. I am sure Paul has gone up against Koraidon plus Fluttermane before, and he came up with a masterful plan. First of all, dropping the restricted, going for that hard switch into Whimsicott turn 1, getting the Encore off into the Koraidon as well, and positioning Calyrex Shadow Rider perfectly. I mean, this is a beautiful game. It's just beautiful.
It has been so good from Paul, but let's keep in mind this is going to be a best of 3. So while Paul has had a dominant first game and will win it off of a double KO, the work's not done yet. We still need Paul to win one more game in order to take this first round of Swiss, and Eric has that comeback mechanism.
Absolutely.
You win these next 2 games, you're the winner.
And I think it's so scary because there's so much that could go wrong for Paul at any given point. If on turn 1 of that game, Koraidon decides, you know what, I'm just gonna attack, and you go for Icy Wind plus Fire Terra Flare Blitz, I think Eric literally wins the game on the spot. Paul had to get so many turns right, but this is what it looks like to win in what I would consider an unfavorable matchup. You have to find clever ways to maneuver, and Paul did exactly that. You know, goes for the gamble of dropping the Miraidon, brings the Urshifu, and Urshifu was so critical in this game, putting on so much pressure with that Surging Strikes. And so I think going into game 2 now, if you're Eric, you're probably like, okay, I feel like my Pokemon are actually really good here. I just need to sharpen up a little bit. If I get like the Encore turn correctly against Koraidon, or if turn 1 I just attack, it looks like a different game. My main question from Paul's end is he actually did not bring that Miraidon. Does he want to potentially weave it in? Because I think it is still bringable in this matchup.
It would be so interesting to see, especially because maybe you can forego something like the Tailwind on the Whimsicott just because you know you have that Choice Scarf attached to the Miraidon. And can you get enough damage out with something like multiple Draco Meteors? The Electro Drift is still going to be pretty valuable for just making sure that the Electro Drifts are even better. But does that help out? Like, if Eric brings a Raging Bolt, do you really want to set that up for that gold?
Absolutely, and I want to go back to that Urshifu pick because I think in Team Preview, like, it looks like it's just so tough into everything, right? You're facing down the sun, obviously, but one of the nice things is close combat's damage, of course, is not reduced by the sun, and we saw that close combat into the Incineroar, right? You have to be really smart about how you position your Urshifu, but it makes a lot of sense because the rest of Paul's team, if you're not going to bring that Miraidon, it's like Calyrex is never going to do enough damage into the Assault Vest Incineroar. And so like the only way you can actually damage Assault Vest Incineroar is getting a close combat off into it. And so, yeah, like it feels bad when you have to bring Urshifu into this matchup, but Paul showed how you can make it work. I think if you're Eric, you've got to be thinking about that a little bit as well. If I can eliminate Incineroar a little bit earlier, then that opens the door. Or if you can eliminate Urshifu, opens the door for Incineroar. But here's a run back of Fluttermane and Koraidon.
How does turn 1 play out, though? That's where we're going to need to see those adjustments from Eric to make sure that Paul doesn't start to sneak away a win again in the second game. And that kind of just starts out with, like, Fake Out. Can you do Nasty Plot here if you're cool?
I think Nasty Plot would be cool, a little bit flashy, though, mainly because it is not, like, that important to get the boost right now, right? And so This is what's so fun, because even though we saw the exact same leads, Eric right now has got to be a little bit scary. He's like, oh my goodness, you actually called me out in game 1, and what if you just switch into Whimsicott again, right? You see, Paul here has also indicated something different. He's going just for that fake out. He's saying, you know what? Just going to go for damage here, because if you're Eric, you also have to be scared about eating up a, fake out plus a Draining Kiss, for example, from Calyrex immediately. So yeah, one of the questions is what Terras. I think in the last game, Paul was able to bait out that Fire Terra really well. Fluttermane normal Terra is going to be really, really nice against a potential Astral Barrage, right? But here we go.
Okay, well, first terrestrialization getting used in the second game. We'll go over to the Shadow Rider Calyrex again, removing its weakness that it would have to the Shadow Balls from that Fluttermane on the other side, and it's also going to be boosting up some damage from, let's say, a Draining Kiss. But Eric's not going to fall for it. He's just going to go for the Protect again onto the Koraidon, and since there's no switch into the Whimsicott, at least this Protect will protect this Koraidon from the fake out from the Incineroar. But with the Moonblast, it's actually a pretty good turn here for Eric.
Yeah, I think if you're Paul, the best case here is Koraidon not protecting, you just get a ton of damage immediately. This is still not a bad position where you bring the Fluttermane down quite low, but it feels like Calyrex is still such a crucial Pokemon for Paul, and you've obviously taken a lot of damage. And now this next turn, you're threatened by Icy Wind plus Collision Course or Icy Wind plus Flare Blitz. We see what Paul's opted for in the back, by the way. There is no Whimsicott. It's actually that Clefairy adjustment this time around. And so Clefairy is nice for defense, but it's not very good from an offensive standpoint. Calyrex has to do so much of the heavy lifting in this game because, once again, there is no Miraidon. And so, if you're Paul, it's not a bad turn one, but where do you go from here? You are threatened by a lot of damage from the opposing side. And so do you go for example, a hard call out thinking, you know what? He's going to try to target my Calyrex down. I'm just going to attack with it. Or do you protect and try to, finish off the Flutter Mane like Paul's thinking about? You could also protect switching Clefairy. So this is still so scary for Paul.
And what is this Koraidon going to do? We do have another Terrestrialization. It's going to be for Eric this time around, and the Koraidon, again, just like that game number 1. It's going to make it a little bit less vulnerable to things in the future, but especially if you're already thinking ahead, and it's like, well, there's an Urshifu that might be waiting in the back. That is a little bit better. Protect here onto the Shadow Rider Calyrex from Paul as the Flutter Mane just goes for the Icy Wind.
Is it Collision Course is the question, because if it's not and Paul's able to just eliminate Flutter Mane, it's incredible turn. We saw the Flare Blitz lock into Flutter Mane, so let's see. Is Koraidon going for Collision Course? It's the Flare Blitz! Paul is just getting call after call correctly.
No way! That means that the Shadow Rider Calyrex is going to be around for a little bit longer, and this Flutter Mane can't do anything else in this second game. Eric has already lost to Pokemon in the first couple of turns of game 2.
Oh my goodness. I mean, to have an Incineroar in the field against a Collision Course Koraidon, right? To have the guts to go for that.
No way.
Yeah, I think in that position, it makes sense for Eric. He recognizes, okay, if you get greedy and I just knock out your Shadow Rider, I'll probably just win the game on the spot, right? And so once again, Paul still has his work cut out for him. He's gotten a lot of turns right, but once again, the damage lies so heavily on Calyrex Shadow Rider. And so now you've got the Incineroar in from Eric's end. You can obviously fake out into the Shadow Rider slot. Koraidon has a very free Collision Course that it can take on Incineroar, so this turn I think Eric should be able to respond with some offense.
But then I wonder, though, do you actually just switch out the Calyrex here? I think Eric should identify now that it's going to be a lot of eggs into this Calyrex basket. So is that something that Paul can actually use against Eric? I know my Calyrex is public enemy number 1.
Yeah, and the main question I have here from Eric's end is, do you still target the Calyrex slot? Yeah, you have Collision Course onto Incineroar, but do you actually want to take that knockout? Because Incineroar is not that scary right now, right? So Clefairy comes out, Paul is trying to set up for success, and it's actually going to be the Flame Charge coming out here, which crucially will give Koraidon a speed boost. It will now outspeed that Calyrex Shadow Rider, but of course the Clefairy won't faint from it.
Yeah, it's actually taking a lot of damage, though. I mean, that's about 50% as soon as it switches in, thanks to the double up of that Flame Charge as well as the U-turn. And it's also going to give Eric a positional advantage. You're gonna have to reveal that 4th and final Pokemon of the game, but the Raging Bolt adjustment, what a good call.
Are we even playing Regulation I? It's one restricted from both sides. Koraidon on one, Shadow Rider on the other. And, I can't help but think, wow, okay, if there was actually Miraidon now, it'd be really good because you don't have to deal with the Ice Rider. But obviously, Paul didn't bring it here. And so if we go to a game 3, I think that's something that he might be thinking about as an adjustment. But right now, gotten Clefairy out on the field. This is still so scary because Paul's damage only really comes from either the Calyrex or that Urshifu if you're able to position it in. He is not able to do much damage this turn. You've gotten rid of the Clear Amulet on the Koraidon, right? So now you could go for something like a Follow Me into a Parting Shot. Question is, does Koraidon go for the Flare Blitz into Clefairy? Because then you could protect Clefairy and then just Parting Shot instead. So let's see.
Oh, Clefairy goes for the protect, so what does Eric do? It would be smart to be able to target down this Incineroar, and that's exactly what he does. The Collision Course goes right that Incineroar's way. Another one-hit knockout here for this Koraidon, and that's the power that it brings to this regulation. Incineroar is such a high-usage Pokemon. No wonder why this Koraidon is so excited. The Thunderbolt now from this Raging Bolt, of course, is going to go into the Protect. But if you're Paul, you've got to be nervous. That Urshifu in the back, it could just get Thunderclapped.
Absolutely. I really like this Raging Bolt adjustment because Calyrex Ice Rider did very little in that last game, right? It wasn't able to do much damage with Glacial Lands, and the Raging Bolt is kind of like a sleeper pick here because you have the Sun up for it, right? And there's actually no electric terrain for it, but even just with the photosynthesis, it still does a lot of damage. And it's very bulky is the key thing. You cannot knock it out very quickly. The best way to knock it out actually would be a Draco Meteor from a Miraidon, but Paul showed his hand in game 1 saying, I don't want to bring Miraidon, and so I love Eric's decision to adjust to it, and I think that's actually really, really crucial. But that last turn was big, right? It ends up just being Collision Course into Incineroar. There was the ability for Clefairy to go for a Follow Me, and then Incineroar to go for a Parting Shot. It's not what we end up seeing happening, so Urshifu now comes out, but still going to be a tricky spot. You do have the ability to maybe go for something like a Helping Hand into a close combat. It's the last turn of Sun as well. So you could, of course, try to go for another protect, but that feels really scary. Urshifu might want to protect, but then Clefairy just gets picked off, and then the Shadow Rider is just outsped, right? And so this is still really scary for Paul, in my opinion, because at any given point in the battle, he only has one thing threatening with offense.
It feels like such a volatile turn as well, because what if you go for follow me, expecting something like the Thunderclap? That means the Thunderclap and the Raging Bolt would fail, and then Urshifu is a bit more free and clear, but still having to deal with the Sun. Those close combats, not only are you going to be dealing damage, but you also have to take that negative effect where you're going to be dropping your defenses.
Absolutely, and so yeah, going for the safe follow me here, just saying, look, you can take the knockout with your Crydon and get a lot of damage onto your Raging Bolt. And there's the Flare Blitz that comes out. But this is going to be so scary for Paul, right? Because Clefairy is going to faint now, and then the Raging Bolt is going to survive close combat and launch back with a Thunderbolt as well. Eric crucially not trying to get fancy with a Thunderclap or anything there. And so Urshifu will be taken down to Focus Sash. And that speed boost earlier from Crydon was a really, really big deal. Close combat does a lot of damage there. I actually wonder if it was helping hand close combat there, whether it would have secured the knockout.
Yeah,
now
well,
Raging Bolt gets the Thunderbolt.
Yeah, and especially, oh, well, of course you have that Focus Sash to be able to help you hang on, but even so, now you've got the Thunderclap. You have no way to actually try to remove that. The Sun has gone away, but I think the damage has already been done.
Absolutely.
This Crydon is faster than the Calyrex, thanks to that Flame Charge we saw so long ago. And it looks like it's just 2 attacks away from Eric closing out this second game and tying up the series.
Yeah, it's like, how do you stop Thunderclap onto Urshifu and then a Flare Blitz into Calyrex, right? Especially with that speed boost. And can't stress how important that speed boost is. Without that speed boost, then the Calyrex actually would outpace, and then you have Astral Barrage pressure. You could protect your Urshifu, go for an Astral Barrage, for example. And so it's Raging Bolt putting in so much work, being just a tanky Pokemon that can also dish out damage. And so that's why I was talking about the potential Miraidon adjustment for Paul going into this next game. But this is one of the key things about Crydon. Being able to get that speed boost means then your late game against Calyrex is a lot stronger, and this is why I think it's a really tough matchup for Paul, right? I feel like he played so well, but in the end, it still might not be enough. He's banking on his Calyrex being bulky enough now to survive a Flare Blitz.
At least the Sun is gone, but with the Terrestrialization, you're still getting a boost of that Flare Blitz's damage, no matter how small, and this Calyrex just cannot withstand that power. Goes down, and it's just as Urshifu on 1 HP left. Paul is definitely going to take his time to think about what is going to happen in this game number 3. And Aaron, I think we got to talk about conditioning a little bit. Paul had that flawless game number 1.
Yep.
On this first turn of game 2, Eric could have done something different, maybe expecting that Whimsicott to come back out, decided to kind of stick to his guns a little bit in terms of that duo. And now for this third game, is Paul gonna fall into a trap, bring that Miraidon, and Eric expects that and is able to kind of get the jump on it? Absolutely,
yeah. I think this endgame is also interesting. There was the ability to click Aqua Jet into the Crydon. Crydon probably bulky enough to survive it, but now after the recoil, it will faint. Aqua Jet obviously helps you get around the Thunderclap as well. And so I think Paul was thinking, look, I'm not going to be able to win if he thinks like Aqua Jet, even with the crit, isn't going to not get the knockout. He's maybe hoping for a mistake from Eric's end. Either way, though, Eric ends up not going for Thunderclap because he's like, okay, you're probably going to go for Aqua Jet instead. It's going to be a really tough endgame either way because the Crydon's pressuring with the Flare Blitz was just so powerful. Paul maybe could have tried to go for like a protect with the Shadow Rider and then like surging strikes, but then it's like if your Urshifu faints, your Calyrex isn't going to beat the Incineroar in the back anyway. And so I think like Eric just has so much defense on his side as well as so much offense, and that's what makes this feel like a pretty lopsided matchup.
But now what?
Now what is the question?
Like, I want to go back to that discussion really quickly.
Totally.
Because if you're expecting Paul to bring the Miraidon out, given that it would have been very good into these 4 Pokemon, then if you're Eric, do you decide to bring back out the Calyrex?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's so interesting. Like, I like the decision to drop Calyrex, quite frankly, even if you think Miraidon's coming back off, because the Incineroar is just so big. The main question, if you are Paul, is if you're going to bring that Miraidon, who are you dropping, right? In this case, he's actually brought every Pokemon on his team other than that Miraidon. So if you're bringing Miraidon, you're bringing Calyrex, you probably want Incineroar in this matchup as well. And like, the Urshifu, once again, feels so crucial just to deal damage into the opposing Incineroar. It's really hard to figure out, like, what is the right Pokemon to drop here. Like, Clefairy also didn't feel like it did a ton in that last matchup. But the friend guard, of course, can be crucial, and so yeah, I don't know. I think the Miraidon adjustment maybe makes the most sense, but maybe Paul's comfortable saying, you know, I think my game modes in 1 and 2 actually worked. I just need to be a little bit sharper in terms of my play. Because, of course, if it was like follow me on Clefairy instead of the protect that turn, would have baited out the collision course, Urshifu would have been able to get an attack off. But once again, it is going to be a run back here. We've seen this before, Rose.
We also saw that Clefairy take 50% damage as soon as it switched in,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, how long can you really expect that Clefairy to hang around? But as we get into this third game, it does look very familiar from the other two that we saw. And so again, it comes down to this first turn. Both players very comfortable with the Pokemon that they've led for the first 2 games of this series. But now, does Paul switch in the Whimsicott, right? Does Eric think that that's going to happen?
We just saw what's in the
attack.
back, and it's actually a run back of last game. It's going to be Clefairy, it's going to be Urshifu. And so this is really, really scary. Oh my goodness, okay. He's like, he's thinking about going for Fake Out on a Flutter Wave that would cover for normal Terra, but we haven't seen Terra at all. So Paul being like, you know what, I'm happy to just play it safe and go for the same play I went for the previous game. I think this makes sense because you could literally lose the game on the spot. But it's going to be a Terra coming out here into the Calyrex once again, so no Terra to start, at least on the Flutter Mane. I think Terra normal Flutter Mane would have actually been really interesting here to give the immunity to Astro Barrage immediately, but the extra damage output on Crydon and the defense is nice, and so here we go, trade in Terras.
Yeah, it's so risky, I think, right? Because you look at that Flutter Mane, it's got the Focus Sash, so yeah, you're going to have it for at least 2 turns, but you're still taking so much damage from either of these Pokemon. I think it's a really risky investment to make when you know your Crydon's probably around for a bit longer. Fortunately, not going to attack this turn because of the Fake Out, but the Icy Wind is going to help out for the next turn.
And no Protect from Crydon, so this is actually a huge difference maker because now it means Calyrex gets an Astro Barrage off into Crydon. That's a ton of damage, and so it's a better start, right? This is what Paul was actually probably hoping for in the previous game. Look how much this is going to do.
Oh
like,
my
that's
goodness.
a lot, right? And if Crydon just takes like recoil damage from Flare Blitz, Aqua Jet will probably be a KO even in the sun. And so it's a much better start for Paul this time. I think Eric was a little bit worried probably about the Whimsicott bait once again, right? He was like, I don't want you to do what you did in game 1. If I protect and you switch in Whimsicott, I'm going to be in tough shape. And so Paul gets the better end of the trade, and this is so important in what I think is such a tricky matchup.
And this Incineroar is going to be doing a lot of damage too. I mean, just even though this Caridon does have that Terra Fire, you can still use Knockoff, get rid of that Clear Amulet for later. If for some reason the Caridon is able to stick around, but any amount of damage on top of this Shadow Rider Calyrex should be able to clean up no matter what. Of course, Paul wants to keep it safe though, because with that Icy Wind, this Flutter Mane and this Caridon are going to be very good. But the taunt into the Incineroar.
It wasn't Parting Shot though, it was Flare Blitz.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, okay, it's just Flare Blitz into Calyrex, so Incineroar is actually going to get an attack up. Can Flare Blitz and Sun knock out Caridon right now?
Oh, so close, but could you imagine? I think Paul would have been able to win the game on the spot off of just that 1 KO.
Totally agreed.
But Eric still has his Flutter Mane and Caridon around for one more turn. Let's see what he can get done with these Pokemon.
Oh, Paul is so close, but also you still got to get there, right? Like the key thing is this Caridon has lost 95% of its health. One single Flare Blitz, it will faint from recoil. It is now also an Aqua Jet KO range, and so I like how Paul played that last turn because he knew even if you Collision Course me, it's fine. I'll then get the free switch into Clefairy, then I can go for Follow Me Astral Barrage, right? And so I think, yeah, it looks flashy to keep an Incineroar out against a Caridon. I think it makes a ton of sense here, similar to maybe what we saw in the previous game. Paul now recognizes, okay, I just protected that Calyrex. I am very, very vulnerable. But Flutter Mane also going to make the pivot out. Eric saying, I actually want to save this for the end game.
And it's going to be his own Incineroar, and it's going to have a nice touch versus the Shadow Rider Calyrex, just because you also have the Assault Vest alongside that defensive typing. But Calyrex is also going to say, see you later. If this Caridon gets taken out, then there is no way for the Shadow Rider Calyrex to be outpaced outside of something like the Flutter Mane. But with this Flare Blitz now, hopefully you're able to get off enough damage that you feel happy with this Caridon sacrifice, and it is almost a one-hit knockout onto that Clefairy. That's a pretty good trade.
Yeah, but crucially Clefairy survives, right? And so that is a really big deal in itself as well. I think because now Paul has positioned his Urshifu for success in this game, right? I think now that you've already eliminated Koraidon, it's going to be Instant, it's going to be Flutter Mane. The key question from Eric's end is it going to be the Raging Bolt or is it going to be that Ice Rider? But Eric, and it's going to be Raging Bolt, but Eric taking that gamble on turn 1 saying, I'm afraid of you switching to Whimsicott. Paul doesn't even bring the Whimsicott, and so gets such a better trade, and now one of the main pieces of offense is eliminated from his end.
But you still have to look at this Raging Bolt as such a key piece. Unlike Paul, who's really putting a lot of emphasis onto that Shadow Rider Calyrex, we already saw the damage that this Raging Bolt is capable of. Paul knows the Clefairy is under threat, decides to protect it, but that leaves this Incineroar, unfortunately, on the receiving end of this fake out. And can this Raging Bolt follow up with some damage? It does. The Thunderbolt into the Incineroar is going to do a nice amount of chip there while you've already bought yourself that turn with the fake out.
Oh my goodness, this feels so tense right now. I think like
feels close.
Paul definitely is like, okay, this has gone definitely, I think, as well as can be. So can I now secure the win, right? Because I'm ahead, but this is a tough matchup. What's crucial is that there's only one more turn of Sun, and because Koraidon is fainted, you can't reset the Sun anymore, so Urshifu suddenly becomes so much more viable. But this turn, you are not threatening with very much damage. You just protect it with Clefairy, and so both of these Pokemon can't really offer too much. Paul, key question is, maybe you want to actually just sacrifice both Pokemon and then get the free switch-ins into both Calyrex as well as that Urshifu.
Is there enough damage on the board? Eric actually is not going to go for the knockout here. Protects this Raging Bolt instead. The Clefairy goes for the Follow Me. Paul knows something is going to be going down this turn as long as this Incineroar actually went for damage. Oh my god, the Clefairy does not get knocked out from that U-turn. It survives with 1 HP.
The U-turn, of course, giving you the ability to pivot, but Clefairy is a bulky Pokemon. It refuses to go down. I'm actually wondering if maybe a free switch in there could have been more beneficial for Paul there.
I think so.
Because then you can, get Urshifu in, you threaten with Aqua Jet immediately, but either way, Clefairy hangs on, and it is the knockoff into the Raging Bolt. Had that been a target into Flutter Mane, I think that actually would have been a fantastic trade for Paul. You force the Incineroar back in, there's no more Sun, there's no more Intimidate, but Flutter Mane now, he does manage to come in for free.
I mean, think about it. Even if you go for Follow Me here, you're going to Follow Me an Icy Wind or something, and then you just have to hope that it misses at that point. And the Raging Bolt still is free and clear to get this knockout onto the Incineroar. So Paul has to think, is a switch better? Do I want to protect this Clefairy? And Eric has a choice now of where to put the damage.
Oh, I like this play a lot. So I think what Paul was hoping for is, hey, I don't mind if you knock out Incineroar because then I have Clefairy, Calyrex, Shadow Rider. I can just help me hand Astral Barrage everything. Eric realizes, okay, I need Instant back out on the field to deal with the Calyrex Shadow Rider, so let me use the pressure of Flutter Mane and actually just pivot right back out. And so it's been a very awkward dance right now. I think Paul is like, I don't want to switch in my final 2 Pokemon. I don't want either of those taking a Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt comes out now, but with Friend Guard and no more Sun, Incineroar actually manages to survive.
And the knockoff is going to get rid of the safety goggles and do a little bit of damage, but there's no Moongus. So that's not actually something that you're too worried about right now. If you're Eric, you're just like, oh, okay, that's just, yeah, funny damage.
Exactly. Oh, this is so close. Like, I feel like Paul has the pieces, but he has to get it together right now and figure out how to weave it all into one place, right? Because once again, it's so scary if you end up switching into your Urshifu or your Calyrex. And so Paul's saying, you know what? I'm okay. You can just knock out my Pokemon now. Please. Let me get my free switch-ins.
Please, just 1 knockout. Just 2 knockouts, please. The Thunderbolt finally finishes off this Clefairy, something that Paul has been hunting for a couple of turns now. And with the U-turn, that's another knockout. But this is it a little awkward? Now this Incineroar is not going to be in front of the Shadow Rider.
Exactly, yeah. And also the Rocky Helmet's been kind of a big deal, right? You're getting chip damage onto the Incineroar, and that adds up when you're facing down a Shadow Rider in the back. And so, exactly like you said, Rose, now it's like you've got a Shadow Rider and you've got an Urshifu out next to each other, and it's Focus Sash Urshifu. I think this is the position that Paul is aiming for. You can't protect the Flutter Mane either, and so something just like an Astral Barrage plus close combat right now feels so safe.
Really does. I mean, you would have even looked at this Flutter Mane with the Sun. You maybe go for something like that Icy Wind, but the fact that you have that priority move onto that Urshifu, this Flutter Mane is going to go down probably without even getting a move off. And then the Raging Bolt, can it do enough? I suppose it could protect this turn, and you just let this Flutter Mane gets sacrificed, but do you really want to give this Calyrex a boost?
Yeah, and I think it's like if you protect, you're facing down close combat pressure. So I think Paul has the pieces right now. Let's see how Eric deals with this, because I don't see an immediate response. I think your best bet is maybe switch Flutter Mane out into Incineroar and then get a Thunderbolt off into Urshifu. And you're hoping you survive Astral Barrage plus close combat, but this is the dream position specifically because of that U-turn awkwardly putting that Flutter Mane back out on the field. But wow, what a nice game by Paul here. And Eric losing that Koraidon. Yep, it's going to be the pivot. Losing the Koraidon so early and only getting damage onto the Clefairy was an amazing trade for Paul, and he has weaved this so nicely. So let's see.
You can see the frustration on Eric's face. He knows that this is going to be a crucial last couple of turns, and it comes so close in this best of 3. The Raging Bolt's going to play it a little bit safe here. It's going to protect itself from this Astral Barrage from the Shadow Rider Calyrex, and critically, Eric is denying it a boost to its special attack for the future. But this Urshifu can punch right through that protect. And so how much damage can this Urshifu actually get up? It would have been a knockout into that Incineroar, but the Raging Bolt takes that okay.
Takes it okay, but that's still a lot, right? And so, like, how are you ever dealing enough damage to Calyrex now? It's, yeah, I think you could pretty easily just double protect right now. I think the main question I have is that Raging Bolt in KO range from an Astral Barrage from Calyrex? Because if so, and you think it's going to KO, you can always double protect and then just Astral Barrage close combat the Incineroar slot, and you should be good there. And so, this has just been so massively handled by Paul. Like, being able to bring Urshifu and actually stall out the Sun from Koraidon has been beautifully played, right? And
so good.
The Urshifu is positioned for success, and once again, it's not easy to execute this because there's so much going up against Urshifu, right? Especially that Sun, but Paul recognizes that, plays to his win conditions. The safe double protect allows you to just get around the fake out this turn, and now it's just Astral Barrage close combat this next turn.
Paul can taste it. A first round victory would help set the momentum and the pace for the rest of this tournament. And I know both trainers want it, but it's slipping away from Eric. After a good couple of turns in the mid game, Paul has turned it back around and is so close to being able to start off the World Championships with a win.
And what Eric was going for is like, okay, maybe Paul makes a mistake and just like attacks with Urshifu. If so, fake out Thunderclap can actually work, and so that's what he was hoping for. But at this point, I think Paul should have the game secured. And once again, it was just getting the offense out perfectly. It's actually Thunderclap hoping for a crit, but even with the crit, you can see it's not going to be enough damage.
It's so bulky, but Paul shrugs it off like it's nothing. The Astral Barrage gets a KO into the Raging Bolt, and the Incineroar is not going to be around much longer either. This Urshifu has set its sights on that final enemy there with the close combat. You get this Flutter Mane back in, but that's an Aqua Jet away from bringing Paul the victory.
I think if you wanted to point to a match in VGC and you're like, oh, like, you know, matchups are such a big part of VGC. How can I ever win in a tough matchup? Show them this set. Because, I mean, this is first of all Eric Rios, right? This is an international champion, one of the greatest players of all time. Paul figured out a way to win here. I think if you look at these teams on paper, it looks so difficult. But this is what makes World so exciting. Paul knows, you know what, Koraidon is not in this matchup. I'm going to drop it. Brings the Urshifu all 3 games against this Koraidon Sun-based team and secures a round 1 victory here.
What a way to kick off the World Championships in Anaheim for 2025. Paul Ruiz, the 2018 World Champion, comes in with a pretty okay season. I think for Paul Ruiz's standards, maybe not something that of a player of his caliber I think he's been particularly happy with. Top 128 at NAIC, top 32 at LAIC. Of course, still a very impressive accomplishment to get a top 32 at NIC. But this is Paul Ruiz that we're talking about here.
That's why he's a world champion, folks. Like, that's what
the set.
That's what it takes to be truly the best in the world. And I just love it. It was so beautiful. And like you were talking about this, Rose, with conditioning, right? And that's exactly what happened. I think like turn 1, game 1, Paul's like, I know exactly what I'm going to do here. You are going to protect. I'm going to punish you from it. And then it just got into Eric's head, right? And so game 2, he does go for the safe protect. Game 3, I think Eric's like, well, I beat you in the last game. Surely you're not just going to go for the same thing again, right? But Paul just does it. And it works out brilliantly. And like, the Koraidon literally just gets one big attack off, and it's on that Clefairy specifically in this game. Koraidon is such a big piece of offense in this matchup, and yeah, I just think like Paul found this way to maneuver and have Urshifu and Calyrex perfectly out next to each other, conserving the focus sash this time. I think that's what Paul probably was thinking. Okay, last game, I made the mistake of just switching in my Urshifu, letting its focus sash get broken, so let me like try to wait even longer to get out on the field, and it works out perfectly.
Oh my goodness.
And even
just a masterclass. You see Paul's face? He's like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's one way to end the game.
Yeah.
But wow, what an incredible display of skill though, and this makes me so excited for the rest of the day. I can't believe it. We've got 8 rounds of Swiss. It's going to be just absolute bangers all day long in terms of these matches. I wonder how that side stream went too.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, so much Pokemon action here.
Yeah, that was just such an exhilarating set. Like, I keep thinking about if there was like an opportunity for Paul to win in like game 2 because it ended up, there was like the Thunderclap Aqua Jet like war, and then it ended up being the targeted Shadow Rider. I don't think it would have ended up mattering since there just wasn't enough offense for like the inside or in the end game. But yeah, Paul decides I'm just going to run it back with the exact same Pokemon. I'm going to make the same turn 1 play as well. And this time I think a single Astral Barrage, I mean, this is why Calyrex is such a crazy Pokemon, right? Like one Astral Barrage can literally be the difference between losing and winning a game. And that amount of damage that you got onto the Koraidon to start off the game was absolutely huge. But that was just peak Pokemon, and it was just beautiful to watch. It felt like, you know, Eric's matchup is probably a little bit more favorable, and so Paul recognized, okay, this is not the easiest. Let me figure out a way to maneuver it. And yeah, once again, just dropping your restricted in all 3 games. Eric dropping his Rice Rider in 2 games as well. Like, this is what Worlds is about.
It's definitely not an easy decision to make. The reason why we have these restricted Pokemon on each team is because they're considered to be incredibly powerful. We don't want everybody to run a team of Miraidon, Koraidon, Shadow Rider, Calyrex, Kyogre, or whatever you want. So we limit it to 2 in some of our formats. And so the fact that you've got access to these super powerful Pokemon and you say, I'm going to leave 1 at home. I don't need it.
Yeah.
I got a Raging Bull. I got Urshifu. They're kind of just as powerful, but it's so cool to see that. And it reminds me that Pokemon is just such a skill-expressive game.
I want to talk about Urshifu once again, because I think coming into this match, you know, Rose, I was like, I don't think Urshifu comes out in this matchup, right? And it
makes sense,
right? So hard to bring, but
the sun, like the typing.
Exactly, but Paul recognizes even if this is not what feels like the best Pokemon, I kind of have to bring it because otherwise, how in the world do I deal with the Sylvest Incineroar on the opposing end? Like that alone can soak up so much damage while also disrupting with knockoff and Flare Blitz in the sun. So Paul is like, okay, this probably doesn't feel great. I gotta bring the Urshifu, and Urshifu in some ways actually kind of felt like the MVP in so many of those games. It was able to just keep getting damage off with close combat, right? And so that's what makes these like dual restricted formats so interesting to watch and follow, because you have probably come up with such concrete game plans that it might play out very differently than if you were just like approaching this matchup for the first time. And this is the World Championships. These players have prepped so hard and they know their lines generally against the top teams, right? And so, yeah, I think it was just so cool to see from Paul's end. And I mean, that game 1 in particular, it was just a masterclass.
And can we talk a little bit about how Paul has actually navigated this double restricted format? Just to give people some context before we speak to him, at Santiago, he used Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and Koraidon with Chestnut, which is such a cool out-of-left-field Pokemon. And then he takes that core and adds Pachirisu to it for NAIC to get top 128. And now he's landed on something that is a bit more standard, but still has some really cool pieces to it. But I think maybe that it helps to give you a little bit more confidence than maybe some of these niche picks.
Absolutely. I am so excited to hear from Paul there. I know that was an exhilarating battle, and I believe we have an interview ready with him. So let's go throw it down and hear from Paul.
Thank you so much, Aaron and Rose. And honestly, thank you for the perfect setup. I'm here with former world champion Paul Ruiz, who had a top 128 finish at NAIC with Chestnut and Pachirisu. Feels like you're playing a little bit more seriously this time around.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was playing seriously also at NAIC. I mean, probably you think, most people would think like, oh, you're bringing Pachirisu 10 or 11 years after, like you are probably a little bit washed, but no, I mean in a format where Miraidon's everywhere and having that follow me with immunities is actually really, really useful. And unfortunately for the little baby Pachirisu, NAIC didn't go as well as I wanted. I did make day 2 and I was like probably 1 win away from maybe trying to get top cut. Some things didn't go my way, but I remember one of the rounds in day 1 Swiss, my opponent had a Semacinta Miraidon team, and he didn't bring the Miraidon at all 3 games because he saw the Pachirisu, so it was doing his job. But yeah, I'm taking this tournament obviously seriously because of the World Championships. And yeah, I'm so happy that I managed to win on stream against Eric Rios, which is an amazing and super strong player that everyone knows about.
Yeah, I don't want to give away all your secrets, but how have you been able to adjust to using so many different restricted Pokemon throughout this format?
Yeah, I mean, I was always in the Calyrex Shadow Rider train. I'm a Shadow Rider believer. I think it is the best restricted. And I used Koraidon at NAIC. I had been using Koraidon for the entire, probably Reg I, right? And I feel like Koraidon is still really strong, but this time I wanted to change a little bit. I went with Miraidon. Miraidon didn't come to the set. We were playing basically Regulation G here, but I feel like it's also really strong. And I feel like playing with double restricted is a little bit difficult because, you know, sometimes you kind of have like that mindset that, hey, you have to bring both your restricteds every single time because it's a double restricted format. Otherwise, you're not, let's say, playing optimally or something like that. But I think one of the hardest things for everyone that is like trying to play this format seriously is understanding when you don't have to bring your other restricted and how you can actually play to the same level without it. That was the hardest part. And I think, when you have Pokemon like Fluttermane, Urshifu, Chi-Yu, Chien-Pao, Raging Bolt, sometimes you can make exceptions and just bring the others because they are sometimes even stronger for the matchup than the restricteds.
Yeah, but looking back at that game one, I mean, it felt like you were really trying to clear the field for that Urshifu to take the win. It felt like towards the end of the game, you were just stalling out the weather, trying to align those surging strikes. Was that always the plan from turn one?
Yeah, so it's a really difficult matchup because, that team has a lot of different directions you can go for. Like, something that surprised me that I actually didn't read at the first time was that the Calyrex didn't have Trick Room. So in my mind, I was like, oh, this is those teams that have Trick Room Calyrex and like a fast mode. And then I was like, maybe it was like turn 2 or 3 when I was like, okay, what's the Calyrex moveset? Oh, it doesn't have Trick Room. So that changes a little bit. But I was initially preparing for like the standard Koraidon Calyrex with the Trick Room option, even though it was not the case this time. But the team is really hard to play consistently all the time because it has a lot of different directions. I said Fluttermane Koraidon I used Fluttermane Koraidon a lot before NAIC, and I understand how aggressive it can be. So my game plan was like putting pressure in the early game and then knowing that like Urshifu, which could feel like a weird pick to bring against a team that has Sun, because of Aqua Jet, like Fluttermanes really need the Sash to be able to disrupt my team. But if you put it in 1 HP, then Aqua Jet is gonna always pressure it. And Urshifu is also Focus Sash, so I know I can at least get an attack off, and there's an Incineroar. If I can stall the Sun, I can Surge in Strikes. And if I cannot stall the Sun, well, I still have Close Combat, which is gonna do a lot of damage to everything that is not Fluttermane, right? And for Fluttermane, I have Aqua Jet if I manage to put it at 1 HP. So it was kind of like the strategy. I know that Eric's team, it was really tough, but I also knew that if I can stall Sun, like I'm gonna make his team really, let's say, less oppressive against me. And when I saw the Calyrex being the last one, I thought he was gonna go for Trick Room, and then I realized it doesn't have Trick Room, so it kind of changed my plan in the late game.
Yeah, well, it was a really incredible set, and I do want to make sure you have time to get to your next match. Do you have any shout-outs you want to give to anybody at home who might be watching?
Yeah, of course. Shout out to my family, to my beautiful wife, to my little daughter, and all the Ecuadorian friends that have been helping me in the last month preparing for this tournament. And yeah, I'm really thankful for being part of this small country with such a big heart and representing my region. I don't know how today's tournament is going to be. I'm going to try my best, but I'm grateful that we had a really strong show here with Eric. I think it was a really, really good match. And yeah, shout out to everyone in the LATAM community also rooting for me. Yeah, the glory to Jesus.
Thank you so much, Paul, and best of luck in the rest of the tournament. And to all y'all watching at home, we'll be back after a short break, so please stay tuned.